Let's turn to the AP for an explanation of what's happening and why Sri Lanka's economy has collapsed, as well as what lies ahead. According to Sri Lanka's Prime Minister, in a statement made last month, the country's economy, burdened by debt, has reached a point of collapse. They are now facing a shortage of funds to pay for essential items like food and fuel. It's evident that this scarcity poses a significant problem, as these are basic necessities. With a lack of financial resources to cover the costs of importing these essential goods and already defaulting on its debts. Sri Lanka is seeking assistance from neighboring countries like India and China, as well as from the International Monetary Fund, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, who assumed office in May, acknowledges the monumental challenge he faces in reviving an economy that was rapidly approaching rock bottom. In response to mounting pressure from protesters who stormed both the Prime Minister's and the President's residences, setting fire to one of them, both leaders, namely Wickremesinghe and President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, have agreed to resign. This situation highlights their apparent struggle and sense of being overwhelmed. It seems as if they are expressing their inability to handle the crisis, fearing for their safety and possibly conceding. I am in over my head. This is too difficult. I don't know how to handle this. I don't want to get killed. I am unwilling to face severe consequences. So I have decided to offer my resignation. The impact of the crisis in Sri Lanka is evident, as citizens are skipping meals due to shortages and enduring long queues in an attempt to purchase scarce fuel. This is a harsh reality for a country that had experienced rapid economic growth, accompanied by a growing and prosperous middle class, until the recent deepening crisis. The severity of this crisis becomes evident when we consider that the government is burdened with a debt of $51 billion and is incapable of making interest payments on its loans, let alone making any significant repayment progress. The tourism sector, which had been a crucial driver of economic growth, has suffered due to the pandemic and concerns over safety following the 2019 terror attacks. Additionally, the currency has depreciated by 80%, leading to increased import costs and exacerbating an already uncontrollable inflation rate. Official data indicates a staggering 57% rise in food costs. As a result, the country is rapidly approaching bankruptcy, with minimal funds available to import essential items such as gasoline, milk, cooking gas, and toilet paper. Political corruption further compounds the issue, as it not only contributed to the mismanagement of the country's wealth but also complicates any potential fiscal rescue. Anand Mukherjee, policy fellow and economist at the Center for Global Development in Washington, highlights the need for strict conditions when providing assistance from organizations like the IMF or World Bank to prevent mismanagement of aid, However, Mukherjee acknowledges that allowing a strategically significant country like Sri Lanka to collapse is not an option, especially considering its location in one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. Despite its tropical climate, Sri Lanka is currently facing food shortages, with the UN World Food Programme reporting that nearly 90% of families are skipping meals or rationing their food. 3 million individuals are receiving emergency humanitarian aid, and doctors are resorting to social media to acquire critical supplies of equipment and medicine. A growing number of Sri Lankans are seeking passports to seek employment opportunities abroad. The government has also granted government workers an additional day off for 3 months to allow them time to cultivate their own food. In short, the population is suffering and desperately hoping for improvements. The dire state of the economy can be attributed to domestic factors, including years of mismanagement and corruption. President Rajapaksa and his brother, the former Prime Minister, have faced significant public criticism. The former Prime Minister resigned in May after weeks of anti-government protests that turned violent. Conditions have been deteriorating for several years. With the 2019 Easter bombings, which claimed the lives of more than 260 people. Dealing a devastating blow to the tourism industry, a crucial source of foreign exchange. Instead of focusing on revenue generation to tackle mounting foreign debt from major infrastructure projects. Rajapaksa implemented the largest tax cuts in Sri Lanka's history, further exacerbating the situation. In recent developments, Sri Lanka experienced a reversal of economic policies, but not before creditors downgraded the country's ratings, preventing further borrowing as its reserves diminished. The tourism industry, which had initially shown signs of recovery, flatlined once again due to the ongoing pandemic. In a sudden move in April 2021, Rajapaksa imposed a ban on the import of chemical fertilizers, aiming to promote organic farming. However, this decision caught farmers off guard and severely impacted staple rice crops, leading to a sharp increase in prices. Furthermore, to conserve foreign exchange, the importation of various luxury items was also prohibited. On top of these challenges, the ongoing Ukraine war contributed to higher food and oil prices, pushing inflation to nearly 40%. In May, food prices soared by almost 60%. Notably, The ban on chemical fertilizers resulted in a 50% reduction in crop yields, effectively cutting the country's food supply in half. This has led to widespread starvation and worsened the inflationary crisis. Additionally, Sri Lanka attempted to stabilize its currency by pegging it to the US dollar. The market value of the currency did not align with the fixed rate, causing further imbalances and exacerbating the overall crisis. Global officials have used strong language to describe the situation, emphasizing the severity of the crisis. Experts describe the current situation as a perfect storm that is leading to the collapse of the economy in Sri Lanka. The Prime Minister's declaration of the economy's collapse in June. Despite not reflecting any specific new development, posed a threat to public confidence in the state of the economy. It seemed to underscore the challenges the government is facing as it seeks assistance from the IMF, and faces criticism for the lack of progress since the Prime Minister assumed office just weeks earlier. This statement may have been an attempt to buy more time and garner support while working towards economic recovery. According to the Ministry of Finance, Sri Lanka's usable foreign reserves stood at only $25 million, leaving the country without sufficient funds to cover import costs, let alone repay billions of dollars in debt. Meanwhile, the Sri Lankan rupee has significantly weakened in value, reaching around 360 against the US dollar. It's worth noting that the rupee was pegged at 150, disregarding its actual market value of 200 or 250. This depreciation further escalates the cost of imports, making them even more financially burdensome. As a result, Sri Lanka has suspended the repayment of approximately $7 billion in foreign debt, regarding the government's response to the crisis. Sri Lanka has been managing the situation with the support of $4 billion in credit lines from India. Talks were held in June with an Indian delegation for potential additional assistance. The president cautioned against relying on India to sustain Sri Lanka in the long term. Sri Lanka's last hopes lie with the IMF, and negotiations are underway for a bailout plan. The Prime Minister expressed an expectation of reaching a preliminary agreement with the IMF later in the summer. The country has also sought assistance from China, while other nations such as the United States, Japan, and Australia have provided a few $100 million in support. In June, the United Nations launched a global appeal for assistance. But the projected funding falls far short of the required $6 billion needed to keep Sri Lanka afloat over the next 6 months. To address Sri Lanka's fuel shortage, the Prime Minister mentioned considering the purchase of heavily discounted oil from Russia. The overall situation is a perfect storm of crises, with multiple factors going wrong simultaneously, leading to the collapse of the economy. And the government's current state of exile as officials fled when the presidential palace came under attack. Just before that, it's important to note that Sri Lanka is not the only country facing such challenges. The current state of the global economy is in crisis, which was initially triggered by the pandemic. The far-reaching impacts of a global health crisis, with significant loss of life in countries implementing lockdown measures, naturally lead to economic disruptions. To exemplify this, let's take a look at Albania. Similar protests against rising fuel and food prices, as well as government corruption, are taking place in Tirana, Albania. The tweet highlights the massive gathering of people expressing their discontent. These situations should be understood in the context of larger countries such as the United States, which also face higher gas prices, increased food costs, and inflation. Although these circumstances are challenging for developed countries, they can have even more devastating consequences for developing nations. When a developing country, already facing various challenges, experiences these additional hardships, it becomes a recipe for disaster. So, as we observe what's happening in Albania, it becomes evident that several other countries are also facing similar challenges. There are concerns that Pakistan might be the next to experience a crisis comparable to Sri Lanka. The possibility of multiple countries encountering severe issues one after another raises concerns that a domino effect may occur. It is crucial to hope that governments and countries can avoid such a scenario. The complex nature of these crises makes it difficult to pinpoint a single cause. Instead, it is the convergence of various factors, numbering 4, 5, or even 6, that have contributed to the current situation. As a result, people are enduring significant hardships and struggling immensely. The future of Sri Lanka remains uncertain. It is unclear whether they will secure loans from the IMF or receive further assistance from other governments. Even if they obtain financial support, effectively managing the crisis in both the short and long term is a daunting task. Considering the collapses witnessed in these countries, the outlook for the future appears unfavorable.